let's get into the actual MPIs here. As Brian mentioned already, here are the positions of the sensors, the IMU sensors, and the metrics that they'll produce. So like we just talked about, on the pelvis, we have the vertical oscillation, but we also have a measure of smoothness. And I'm gonna get into the descriptions and how all of these measures work next. I'll just give a quick overview here. On the thigh, we have the thigh swing speed, and from the foot, we have a whole lot of information that we can gain. Strike angular range, heel pitch, recoil angular range, landing pattern, ground contact time. The bold values here are the LEOMO MPIs. These are things that we have not really ever seen in the past. These are totally new metrics. These have not been done before. And so I understand these can be a little bit new. So what I'm gonna try to do is go through each one and give a little bit of a background on it, what it is that we're measuring, why it's important, how you can apply it, and what some values might look like for elite runners and some different comparisons like that. So to revisit that run stride cycle that we talked about before, here's how we've sort of redefined this at LEOMO to make it more meaningful, to make it a little bit more actionable for coaches and athletes, and to be a little bit more understandable and why these different phases matter and what it is that's actually important to measure at these different phases and where the MPIs fit in and what they cover for this whole stride sequence. So what we can see from left to right, we see a whole stride cycle from toe off to max foot height, peak thigh speed, max shin angle, angle at touchdown, loading, propulsion, and then back to toe off. That is an entire gait cycle. And we can see in the area that our 5 MPIs cover, we are covering the entire stride cycle and being able to pick up and identify and measure characteristics that are happening at every single phase. So we've got recoil angular range happening from toe off to max foot height, thigh swing speed, strike angular range, sort of at that terminal swing and down to contact. We have heel pitch, interacting with the ground, and we have the characteristic of smoothness and how we're being able to maintain the center of mass motion through all of these different actions. And so let's get into these a little bit more specifically here. Let's start with, well, a brief summary actually. LEOMO MPIs allow us to look deeper. What I was just saying, some of these other metrics that we've had in the past, ground contact time by itself, maybe vertical oscillation by itself, these provide useful information for sure, but when they're in isolation, when they're by themselves, we can only get a limited view. It's only so empowering and only so actionable to be able to draw conclusions from what we're seeing in those numbers and be able to turn it into performance improvement. And so the great thing about LEOMO MPIs, one, it's gonna allow us to obtain a comprehensive view of the running stride, right? What I just showed above, this entire running stride is covered with different MPI relating to every single aspect of it. So we can see, you know, we're not just measuring one section here and one section here. We're actually covering how does the body move through this entire gait cycle on every single cycle of the running stride. So this allows us to analyze strengths and weaknesses for better training, which is a really, really useful tool I talked about before with not only personalizing training, but also injury prevention, monitoring injury recovery. And this becomes actionable, coachable feedback on form and efficiency. Number 2 is this allows for motion tracking in training and racing. Remember that talk about being in a biomechanical lab and how it's, you know, it can be a little bit difficult to extract the useful information that we need from that. The other limitation with that is we're in a lab, and that's great and all for a lot of uses, but you know, having worked in a lab for many years myself and doing this testing, between the lab and when you actually get outdoors onto the track, a lot of things can change. The lab is a very controlled environment. You've got a specific focus on your mind to try to do this test and be able to do it well. You're not really thinking about, you know, how do I run an interval workout? How do I need to pace this tempo run? How do I need to think about my leg motion or my torso motion as I'm on this long run and I'm starting to get fatigued? The great thing about these MPIs is these are metrics that we take with us, that we're actually going to be able to test athletes and just be able to use in training to improve performance when we're out on the track in these real life scenarios. The other nice thing about these, like I said, is this real life scenario application combined with our MPIs adds a lot of value to these advanced metrics we talked about before. So now it's not just ground contact time, it's how does our ground contact time change because of all of these other motion variables in a real training environment.